Hello, everybody. I am going to be reading to you the Wikipedia entry on Moloch. So, here it is. Moloch, also rendered as Molech, Molech, Moloch, Molech, Moloch, Moloch, it's spelt in a lot of different ways, is the name of an ancient Ammonite god. Moloch worship was practiced by the Canaanites, Phoenicians, and related cultures in North Africa and the Levant. As a god worshipped by the Phoenicians and Canaanites, Moloch had associations with a particular kind of proprietary child sacrifice by parents. Moloch figures in the Book of Deuteronomy and the Book of Leviticus as a form of idolatry. Leviticus chapter 18 verse 21 says, "And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Moloch." In the Old Testament, Gehenna was a valley by Jerusalem, where apostate Israelites and followers of various Baalim and Canaanite gods, including Moloch, sacrificed their children by fire. Moloch has been used figuratively in English literature by John Milton's Paradise Lost of 1667 and Allen Ginsberg's Howl of 1955 to refer to a person or thing demanding or requiring a very costly sacrifice. Forms and grammar. The Hebrew letters MLK usually stand for Melech, king, but when vocalized as Molech in Masoretic Hebrew text, they have been traditionally understood as a proper name of Moloch. In the corresponding Greek renderings, in the Septuagint translation, in Aquila, and the Middle Eastern Targum, the form usually appears in the compound LMLK. The Hebrew preposition el means to, but it can often mean for, as an. Accordingly, one can translate LMLK as to Moloch, or for Moloch, or as a Moloch, or to the Moloch, or for the Moloch, or as the Moloch, whatever a Moloch or the Moloch might be. We also once find HMLK, the Moloch, standing alone. Because there is no difference between MLK, king, and MLK, Moloch, in unpointed text, interpreters sometimes suggest Molech should be understood in certain places where the Masoretic text is vocalized as Melech and vice versa. Moloch has been traditionally interpreted as the name of a god, possibly a god titled the king, but purportedly mispronounced as Molech instead of Melech, using the vowels of Hebrews bosheth, shame. Moloch appears in the Hebrew of 1 Kings 11:7. Then did Solomon build a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in that hill that is before Jerusalem, and LMLK, the abomination of the son of Ammon. In other passages, however, the god of the Ammonites is named Milcom, not Moloch. The Septuagint reads Milcom in 1 Kings 11:7 instead of Moloch. Many English translations accordingly follow the non-Hebrew versions at this point and render Milcom. The form MLKM can also mean their king, as well as Milcom, and therefore cannot always be sure in some other passages whether the king of Ammon is intended or the god Milcom. It has also been suggested that the Baal of Tyre, Melquart, king of the city, who is probably the Baal whose worship was furthered by Ahab and his house, was this supposed god Moloch, and that Melkart, Moloch, was also the Milcom of the god of the Ammonites, and identical to other gods whose names contain MLK. Amos 5:26 reads in close translation, "But you shall carry Sikkut your king, and Kiyun your images, the star symbol of your god, which you made for yourself." The Septuagint renders your king as Moloch, perhaps from a scribal error, whereas the verse appears in Acts 7:43, "You have lifted up the shrine of Moloch, and the star of your god Rephan, the idols you made to worship." Other references to Moloch use MLK only in the context of passing children through fire, MLLK. Whatever is meant by LMLK, whether it means to Moloch or means something else. Though the Moloch sacrifices have traditionally been understood to mean burning children alive to the god Moloch, some have suggested a rite of purification by fire instead, though perhaps a dangerous one. References to passing through fire with mentioning MLK appear in 18:10-13, 2 Kings 21:6, Ezekiel 20:26, 31:23-37. So this phrase is well documented in Scripture, and similar practices of rendering infants immortal by passing them through the fire are indirectly asserted in early Greek myth, such as the myth of Thetis and the myth of Demeter as the nurse of Demophon. Some have responded to the proponents of this view of the Moloch sacrifices being only a ritualized pass between flame by pointing out their failure to understand the Hebrew idiom lehavir ba'esh, to imply to burn, and their use of anthropological evidence to suspect relevance to draw parallels to early Hebrew religious practices. Biblical texts. The word here translated literally as seed very often means offspring. The forms containing MLK have been left untranslated. The reader may substitute either to Moloch or as a Molch. According to biblical texts, the laws given to Moses by God expressly forbade the Israelites to do what was done in Egypt or in Canaan. Leviticus 18:21 says, "And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord." Then Leviticus 22:5 says, "Again, thou shalt say to the children of Israel, whoever he be of the children of Israel, or the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Molech, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he hath given of his seed unto Moloch, to defile my sanctuary, and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do any ways hide their eyes from the man, when he giveth his seed unto Moloch, and kill him not, then I will set my face against that man, and against his family, and will cut him off, and all that go a-whoring after him, to commit whoredom with Moloch from among their people." 2 Kings 23:10 says, "And he defiled the Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or daughter pass through that fire to Moloch." And then Jeremiah 32:35 says, "And they built the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire unto Moloch, which I commanded them not, neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination, to cause Judah to sin." Archaeology. A temple of Ammon, excavated and reported by J.B. Hennessy in 1966, shows possibly of animal and human sacrifices by fire. Classical Greek and Roman accounts. Later commentators have compared these accounts with the similar ones from Greek and Latin sources, speaking of the offering of children by fire as sacrifices in the Punic city of Carthage, a Phoenician colony. Cleitarchus, Diodorus, Siculus, and Plutarch all mention burning of children as an offering to Cronus or Saturn, that is, to Baal Hammon, the chief god of Carthage. Issues and practices relating to Moloch and child sacrifice may also have been exaggerated for effect. After the Romans defeated Carthage and totally destroyed the city, they engaged in a post-war propaganda to make their arch-enemies seem cruel and less civilized. Paul G. Mosca, in his thesis described below, translates Clearchus's paraphrase of Aeschylium to Plato's Republic as, "There stands in their midst a bronze statue of Cronos, its hands extended over a bronze brazier, the flames of which engulf the child. When the flames fall upon the body, the limbs contact, and the open mouth seems almost to be laughing until the contracted body slips quietly into the brazier. Thus it is that the grin is known as a sardonic laughter, since they die laughing." Diodorus Siculus wrote, "There was in their city a bronze image of Cronus extending its hands, palms up and sloping toward the ground, so that each of the children, when placed thereon, rolled down and fell into a sort of gaping pit filled with fire." Diodorus also relates that relatives were forbidden to weep, and that when Agathocles defeated Carthage, the Carthaginian nobles believed that they had displeased the gods by substituting low-born children for their own children. They had attempted to make amends by sacrificing 200 children of the best families at once, and in their enthusiasm actually sacrificed 300 children. In the book The History of Sicily from the Earliest Times, the author recounts the tale significantly differently. He states that the Carthaginian nobles had actually acquired and raised children not of their own for the express purposes of sacrificing them to the god. The author states that during the siege, the 200 high-born children were sacrificed in addition to another 300 children who were initially saved from the fire but by the sacrifice of these acquired substitutes. Plutarch wrote in De Superstitionis 171, "But with full knowledge and understanding, they themselves offered up their own children, and those who had no children would buy little ones from poor people and cut their throats, as if they were so many lambs or young birds. Meanwhile their mother stood by without a tear or moan, but should she utter a single moan, or let fall a single tear, she had to forfeit the money, and her child was sacrificed nevertheless. And the whole area before the statue was filled with the loud noise of flutes and drums took the cries of wailing should not reach the ears of the people." Jewish Rabbinic Commentary. In the 12th century, Rashi, commenting on Jeremiah 7:31, stated, "Tophet is Moloch, which is made of brass, and they heated him in front of lower parts, and his hands being stretched out and made hot, they put the child between his hands, and it was burnt, when it vehemently cried out. But the priests beat a drum, and the father might not hear the voice of his son, and his heart might be moved." A rabbinical tradition attributed to the Yakout of Rabbi Simeon says that the idol was a hollow and was divided into 7 compartments, in one of which they put flour, in the second turtle doves, in the third ewe, in the fourth a ram, in the 5th a calf, in the 6th an ox, and in the 7th a child, which were all burned together by heating the statue inside. Moloch as an allegory. Milton's Paradise Lost. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, 1667, Moloch is one of the greatest warriors of the fallen angels. First Moloch, horrid king besmeared with blood, of human sacrifice and parents' tears. Through, for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children's cries unharmed and passed through fire, to their children's cries unheard that passed through fire, to his grim idol, him the Ammonite, worshipped in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Agrob and in Basan, to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, the wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God, and on that opprobrious hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom, Tophet thence, and black Gehenna, called the type of hell. He is listed among the chief of Satan's angels in Book 1, and is given a speech at the Parliament of Hell in Book 243 to 105, where he argues for immediate warfare against God. He later becomes revered as a pagan god on earth. As social or political allegory. In Bertrand Russell's A Free Man's Worship, 1903, Moloch is used to describe a particularly savage brand of religion. The savage, like ourselves, feels the oppression of his impotence before the powers of nature, but having in himself nothing that he respects more than power, he is willing to prostrate himself before the gods, without inquiring whether they are worthy of worship. Pathetic and very terrible is the long history of cruelty and torture, of degradation and human sacrifice, endured in the hope of placating the jealous gods. Surely the trembling believer thinks, when what is most precious has been freely given, their lust for blood must be appeased, and more will not be required. The religion of Moloch, as such creeds may be generically called, is in essence the cringing submission of the slave, who dare not, even in his heart, allow the thought of it that his master deserves no adulation. Since the independence of ideals is not yet acknowledged, power may be freely worshipped, and received in ultimate respect, despite its wanton infliction of pain. During the growth of vehicle ownership in the United States, the concern for automobile deaths prompted at least one editorial cartoonist to label the automobile the modern Moloch, viewing the car as a machine of death. In letters of Bruckmann's Munich Cosmic Circle, the name Moloch was used to symbolize a Jewish god, hostile to life. In The Gathering Storm, 1948, the first volume of Winston Churchill's History of World War II, Churchill describes Hitler's triumph at the moment he finally achieved total power in 1933. He had called from the depths of defeat the dark and savage furies latent in the most numerous, most serviceable, ruthless, contradictory, and ill-starred race in Europe. He had conjured up the fearful idol of an all-devouring Moloch, of which he was the priest and incarnation. In Capek's War with the Newts. In Karel Čapek's War with the Newts, 1936, the Newts counter Christian attempts at conversion by turning to their god of their own creation named Moloch. At a later period, and almost universally, the Newts themselves came to accept a different faith, whose origin among them is unknown. This involved adoration of Moloch, whom they visualized as a giant newt with a human head. They were reported to have enormous submarine idols made of cast iron, manufactured to their orders by Armstrong or Knoop. But no further details ever leaked out of their cultic rituals since they were conducted underwater. They were, however, believed to be exceptionally cruel and secret. It would seem that this faith gained ground rapidly because the name Moloch reminded them of the zoological Molke, or the German Molch, the terms for newt. And there we have it. That's, if you'd like to read the West, just go to Wikipedia. Thanks for watching.